Welcome everybody. My name is Evelyn Wolf. I'm the CMO here at VisibleThread, and I'd like to welcome you to our VT virtual session today. I'm really delighted that we have Madison Diemer of Express Script joining us for using VisibleThread to drive sales and RFP strategy. Before I hand over to her, just a couple of housekeeping things. So our webinar today is going to last 45 minutes to an hour, a little bit dependent on you guys of how many questions you have. We have the question facility in your GoToWebinar panel. So please pop in any questions you have for Madison or for myself in there, and we'll get to them right at the end. Before you log off the webinar completely, there is a survey, and I'd really appreciate it if you guys could complete it and let me know what you thought about today's session, but also what you'd like to see in the future. And as always, we are recording this session and we will share it around with everybody afterwards, hopefully tomorrow, if not early next week. So as I said, my name is Evelyn Wolf. I'm the CMO here at VisibleThread. If you have any questions ever for me, just feel free to reach out to me by email directly. But today is all about Madison and Express Scripts. Madison, we're really delighted to have you with us today as you'll share how you guys are using VisibleThread and are getting the most out of VT Docs. And I'd say without further ado, I'm going to hand presenter rights over to you. And there we go. And I let you take it away.
Well, perfect. I'm happy to present today. I'm Madison Diemer, and I will be presenting on how Express Scripts is using VisibleThread to drive strategy. Before I get started, I want to thank the VisibleThread team for allowing me to share some of what I've learned through using the tool. It has been so nice watching the different presentations throughout the past several weeks, and I'm really looking forward to presentations to come. Pretty good is not good enough. I want to be great. Christina Yang. This quote can apply to any facet of your life, but I think this is especially true for folks who work proposals. I'm sure there are several of us who have felt the agony of sending out a good enough proposal that maybe wasn't as tailored to the prospect or client as we would have liked. I'm hopeful that there are equally as many of you who have felt the high of sending out that grand slam RFP. But before we delve into how we can create more RFPs that make you want to high-five your team or virtually high-five them, I'm going to give you a little bit of background about myself and Express Scripts. Like I said before, my name is Madison, and I'm a senior manager for Express Scripts bid strategy and execution team. I work primarily for our health plan and public sector divisions. I truly enjoy helping others, solving problems, creating the perfect response, and winning, like I'm sure most of you do. Outside of work, I love spending time with my friends and family. I enjoy chasing my daughter around, reading a good book, and watching TV. That being said, I've shamefully watched all 16 seasons of Grey's Anatomy, and you'll find bits and pieces of the show referenced throughout my presentation. I work remotely from the great state of Iowa, where pigs outnumber humans 4-to-1, and nearly everyone you meet is Iowa nice. That being said, feel free to email me or connect on LinkedIn later if you have any more questions after the presentation. Express Scripts is a healthcare opportunity company that focuses primarily on the prescription benefit. We're constantly finding new solutions to help reduce the cost of healthcare and to improve our members' lives. Within the bid strategy and execution team, there are approximately 40 employees who work across 5 different market segments: health plan, public sector, specialty, national accounts, and key accounts. We also have a team that focuses primarily on content and the technology we utilize. We're using VisibleThread to build stronger templates by comparing multiple RFPs across a benefit advisor using the discovery tool. On the flip side of that, We're also able to figure out which questions seem truly specific to the client or prospect. This helps us to decipher where we should be spending more of our time. The goal would be to focus more of our time tailoring responses for the client-specific questions that are represented in navy, and less time on the benefit advisor-specific questions represented in light blue. Now, while our sales team does a fantastic job of proactively prospecting within the marketplace in order to learn about prospects' pain points and areas of interest, sometimes we find that the RFP shows us additional items of importance that maybe weren't discussed in a prospecting meeting. Before we started using VisibleThread, we would manually compare a new RFP to one or more previously sent RFPs to flag client-specific questions. And typically it would be more like 3 or 4 RFPs that we'd be comparing, because sometimes benefit advisor questions are in one RFP but not the next, but then you might find it in the third one. So that's why it would take so long. And this alone would take us anywhere from 8 to 12 hours, which equates to roughly 1 to 2 business days, which is a lot of time when you come to think of it. Now, through use of VisibleThread, it maybe takes us an hour, and that gives us a lot of our time back to focus on things that really add value to the proposal. So, why focus on templates? I'll be the first to admit that help here is tricky, and that alone can equate to getting difficult questions in RFPs, which then leads to use of extra time and resources in order to respond. In 2019, we received almost 1,400 RFPs. That alone is a daunting number for those who manage the RFPs and for all of the subject matter experts we engage across the enterprise. Can you imagine being notified that your expertise is requested on an RFP question that you've answered in the past, and it's been the same question on more than one occasion? Well, you might look a little bit like Meredith Gray. You also might look like Meredith if you're the project manager working on that bid and you've been trying to track down a response and no one is getting back to you. And the reason why they're not getting back to you is because they have everyone else's questions that they also have to respond to. Over the past 18 months, our department has been focused on implementing new technology to transform the way we've been doing RFPs. We've implemented the use of VisibleThread and implemented RFP.io as our proposal project management software. Our mantra for 2020 is effortlessness. For many benefit advisors we work with, we keep a template of question and answer pairs we see from them habitually. In an effort to achieve effortlessness, our content team has been refreshing our templates by updating the content and adding new question and answer pairs. Our hope is that we can reduce the amount of time it takes to complete an RFP and to reduce the amount of people that we need to engage in the process. Currently, we engage approximately 500 SMEs across the enterprise, which is a lot. Because our content team has been so hard at work on our templates, we can now populate some RFPs in less than an hour, which is truly amazing. Now that you have a little bit of background as to why templates are important to us, I'm going to walk you through how I prepare the documents prior to the load into VisibleThread. In order to keep both client and benefit advisor confidentiality, I've updated the documents to read different hospital names from Grey's Anatomy and have created a consulting firm named after Meredith Gray herself. First, you're going to want to make sure that you use original documents and not your final proposal with responses. While it's important that we keep those on hand as far as creating the template later, we're really just using the tool to figure out which questions we want to include in the template. Then you're going to want to make sure that you remove the instructions and background. Like I said, we're going to focus solely on the questions. Then you're going to want to change the client name to a placeholder. We like to use client name in brackets. And as far as that goes, we're looking at the client name within the questions or requirements that are being asked of us. That being said, you'll want to be sure that you save the documents with the client name as the title of your document. That way you can figure out where your questions are coming from, because if you placeholder it, there's really no going back from there. Lastly, you'll want to create a folder within VisibleThread and upload all of the documents to that folder. I find it helpful to name the folder after the benefit advisor that we're working on a template for. Now I'm going to share my desktop recording to walk you through how I create the template. And like I said before, I want to make sure that I'm keeping everything confidential for our clients. So I've gone ahead and hidden my folder, but I've uploaded my 4 sample RFP documents into my folder, and I've selected it at the folder level. We want to make sure that it's at the folder level, that way we have all the documents available to us. So you're going to go ahead and go into the Discovery tool, and from there you're going to click the Frequency button. After it loads, you're going to click Export, and you're going to export the bottom grid into an Excel document. And we'll go ahead and let that load for us. From here, you're going to want to go ahead and place a filter on your header. And then I'm going to go ahead and filter on terms, and I like to sort from A to Z, and that's going to pull a lot of my like questions together. From here, I'm going to go ahead and create a pivot table on a new sheet. And we're going to use content for both the rows and the values. And then I'm going to zoom out, that way we can actually see it all, and pull it over so it's a little bit more manageable to read. And we'll wrap the text. From here, you're going to want to go ahead and copy all of the pivot table, at least the contents of it, and we're going to go ahead and paste this into the second row of a new worksheet. That way it allows us room for a header. And then once we've got our header in, we're going to go ahead and pull it out a little bit so we can read it, but then we're going to place another filter on our header. So from here, you can sort from largest to smallest, smallest to largest. You can go in and select, a particular number value of how many times it shows up. So this would be items that show up only in one RFP. From here, you can copy a portion of the question and do a search within the discovery report if you wanted to figure out which RFP a particular question came from. So I've done it here, and I can see that this particular question came from the Dillard Medical Center PBM RFP. There is an easier way if you're wanting to focus on items that are truly client-specific. So in order to do that, you would go click on your folder again, and then in the Discovery tool, you would select a filter. So I've filtered down to items found in one document, but not the other. And for this example, I'm really interested in what was in the Dillard Medical Center RFP. So I'm going to select that. And then we're going to, again, export that bottom grid into an Excel sheet. So I've done this here. The screen grab on my left is that export. I can see that most of these questions come from the strategic growth support section of the RFP. And having worked on several RFPs from this benefit advisor, I know that this seems to be in line with where we're finding most of our client-specific questions. So I feel pretty good about this export. Now we're going to talk a little bit more about creating the template itself. And you're going to want to set some guidelines as far as what value qualifies as a question for inclusion in your template. And sometimes that's going to require playing with the filters a little bit. If I filter to questions that have a value of 3 or more, that gives me roughly 415 questions that have a match. If I modify it, so I look at questions with 2 or more, that bumps it up to 527 questions, leaving me a great base of questions that we would want to build a template around. It's also really important to take a look at those 1 values, because sometimes wording is just ever so slightly different that it doesn't include it in a pair, but the question itself is in fact the same. An example of this would be if in the RFP they're asking that we provide 500 licenses at no charge. So all of that question might be the same except for the number of licenses they're looking for. In the other RFP, it might be 200 or 100, but because the base of the question is in fact the same, I want to include that question. And then within our answer, we can set some boundaries as to when we can agree and when we don't want to agree. So anything that is truly a 1 value, I'm going to leave out for including the question in a template, because we don't want to unnecessarily bog down our content library. And an easy way to do this, so since we've gone ahead and sorted from A to Z, our content should bring several of our like questions together. So it should be really easy for you to pick out which ones are truly those 1 values. And the nice thing about it is we've already responded to these RFPs in the past, so we're able to easily reference how we've responded and use that as a starting point for creating our template. Like I said before, our department is going through a pretty big technology transformation. That being said, we've been reviewing the majority of our processes to see if we can automate some of the manual work that we do. And I've been looking at ways that we can use VisibleThread specifically to make life a little bit easier for us. One of the projects that I have considered using VisibleThread for is assigning work. And currently, we have a project team that manually counts RFP questions, among other things, to assess the complexity score. This is a very time-consuming but necessary process. And the reason why we assess the complexity score is we use it as a way to match RFPs with project managers based off of experience and workload. We've been looking at ways to use VisibleThread to help assign our workload. In a future state, once we've got templates to where we would like them to be, we could potentially run a compare of the template questions against an RFP to determine a percentage of difference. From there, we would be able to assign RFPs with a higher percentage of difference to more senior project managers who would maybe only work on 1 bid at a time, as compared to assigning bids with a lesser percentage of difference to an individual who would maybe work several bids at any given time. Through testing, we found that creating a dictionary with the templated questions and running a compliance matrix more or less brings us the result we would like to see. But because we have quite a few templates that we're still working to get in order, we're holding on moving too far with this potential process change. We're also looking at ways that we can use the themes function of the discovery tool to optimize our proposal project management software search engine function. We're hopeful that we can use themes as tags within our software that matches both on the RFP question itself and the content. And we're hopeful that this will give us better search results for the RFP content. Currently, our project management software takes the question itself as a first-line search. So that's why it's important for us to have these themes or tags match both the RFP questions and the content. So once we've got a good list of themes and we've matched them to each topic and subtopic, we plan to match them to SMEs to generate a responsibility matrix. We currently have somewhere around 500 SMEs we engage across the enterprise, And oftentimes it's difficult to decipher what belongs to who. And by taking out some of that guesswork, we're hopeful to see fewer questions being routed incorrectly to the SMEs. And then hopefully that will allow us to have shorter response times, just given that it's going to them correctly in the first place. Now I'm happy to take any questions that you might have for me.
Great. Well, Madison, that was really fantastic to listen to. And I was really glad to see the Grey's Anatomy references. You and I have something in common there. I have to say, all 16 seasons as well. The first question I have is whether you could dive a little bit more into any risks associated with templates and working out of in a templated way.
Yeah, so there are some risks. Obviously, you need to make sure that you are staying on top of maintaining that template. So you probably want to go back, maybe once a quarter, twice a year, to make sure that your questions that are being asked are still relevant and the content that you're using is still approved for use. The other thing that you'd want to make sure when you're building your template, as far as answers go, you would want to set some guidelines as far as when use of that response is appropriate. And sometimes that's a live threshold, or sometimes it's a sales call, and making sure that you note that. That way your PMs have that kind of information on hand.
Yeah, okay. And I think the next one here is kind of in relation to that. You mentioned at the beginning of the presentation that the 500 SMEs, and gosh, it must be amazing to have kind of that wealth of knowledge in the organization. You mentioned there that you're able to work with them to, I suppose, nearly, I don't want to say the word avoid, but you're avoiding asking them the same questions over and over again by having the templates. But ultimately, when you have a response completed, do you get the SMEs to double check it again just to be 100% sure that the templated answer is correct?
So typically, when we are creating our template, we pull together responses from our content library, and our content library has been created in conjunction with our SMEs. So if it's something that we're able to pull from our content library, we go ahead and do that, and we don't need them to review it because they've gone ahead and pre-approved it and said, this is A-OK to use on any sort of bid, no big deal. As far as questions go that we would want to build the template around and we don't have great language within that content library, we would certainly go to them, craft a response with them, and make sure that they're comfortable with it for standard template use. And sometimes they'll say, while we get asked this question a lot, it doesn't make sense to have a standard response because it varies so much from bid to bid. Why don't you just make a note to please reach out to the SME? And we have instances where we do that too.
Okay, great. And it's really interesting to hear about that content library. It's nearly like a treasure trove of answers of anything that could come your way. Do you, with those answers, work with the readability tool within VT Docs as well to kind of see whether your responses are of a good readability score?
We haven't quite yet, but I do know that that is kind of on our roadmap for this coming year. We want to make sure that we're updating our content so it's readable and just overall really more engaging for our readers.
Fantastic. Great. And I suppose another question that I have here is around, it's also around other capabilities within VisibleThread, whether you work with Doc Compare or Excel Compare as well, to then figure out your final versions of responses.
So not necessarily for final versions, but a lot of times what we do is we will do a compare at the beginning of the process and say, okay, I know that we've responded to this RFP the past, couple of months ago, and we have this one in. Let's see how closely they match. And then from there, you know, if it's the same kind of line of business, same number of lives that we're working with, we're able to utilize some of those responses, even if we don't have a template currently built out. But on the back end, we don't do a lot of comparing because we really try and make our final product really customized to the client or to the prospect. A lot of times we'll go ahead and take data and use that data that we get from them to generate savings or recommendations for them. So we have to be a little careful with that.
Yeah. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Can you give us an idea about the number of responses you create in a given year or a month or so, just so that people get an understanding of the size of the operation?
Yeah, so I work primarily on our health plan division, and a lot of the RFPs that we see for health plans, I would say range from anywhere from 1,000 to 1,400 questions. I know we've had some RFPs upward to 3,400 questions, and we get maybe 5 weeks to respond. So that's why it's important for us to be able to use these templates, because if you're having to manually look up a response for every single question, that's all you would ever do and probably wouldn't add as much value as you could otherwise.
Exactly. It would sound more like a copy and paste procedure then. And I suppose that's where the time saving then comes in, that you have these templated responses that you can easily pull together.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Maybe walk us through that time saving again. You said at the beginning you're down from about a day to an hour.
Yeah. So I know that before we had VisibleThread, I would look through probably 3 or 4 RFPs at a time. And most of these RFPs would be in Word. So I'd do a control search and, you know, see if I could find a portion of the question that matched across 3 or 4 bids. And from there, I would then have the new RFP that I was looking for. And if that question were in any of those 4 other bids, I would go ahead and add a comment bubble that says standard benefit advisor question. If I couldn't find the question in any of the other 4 previous bids, then I'd say, okay, this one's client specific, and I'd leave a tag on the question and note that this is something that I want to come back to talk to sales about, to talk to our clinical partners to see what we can do to really tailor our response a little bit more, rather than just providing some standard language that we have.
Perfect. Great. Guys, to everyone who's listening, we've gone through the questions that have been submitted. But if there's anything else, now is your time to ask Madison while we have her here live on the call. So I'm going to give everybody another minute or 2 to submit a question if you have one. But in the meantime, I'd already say thank you so much, Madison. This was so helpful to hear how you guys are utilizing templates and working with VisibleThread. And actually, here's a last minute question that has come in. So hold on, Madison, I'm going to read this out to you. I was most curious in the portion of your tutorial where you are narrowing down on different variations of describe your XYZ as a comparison to similar RFP responses. I'm concerned that my search terms will be either too narrow, resulting in too few matches, or too broad, that we get too many matches. How do you find a balance between the two? And are there any tricks to help broaden the search criteria without being overwhelmed with too many less relevant matches?
Yeah, so one thing that I've done, and And at first, when I tested this, I was like, oh, I can just upload the entire RFP. It'll be fine. And that was overwhelming because I got, different client names, and then that turned up as a theme. And I was like, ooh, I don't want that. And then it maybe didn't match questions as well. So that's why I found that it was important to pull out the instructions and any kind of background, and then again pulling out that client name and then replacing it as a placeholder. It's not perfect, and it probably won't be, but at least if you are filtering from A to Z, you're going to more likely see those questions that are the same or close to the same, and then you can highlight it or flag it as a question that we actually want to include.
Okay, perfect. I think that those are actually all the questions that we've come through, that have come through. So Madison, thank you again for spending the time with us today. This was so very helpful and interesting. So thank you very, very much.
You are welcome. I am so happy that I got to present to you all. And again, if you have questions that you come up with later, feel free to connect with me via email or LinkedIn, and I'm happy to help.
Fantastic. We really appreciate that, and we will, to everyone, share out the presentation slides as well as the recording in the next couple of days. In the current season of virtual sessions, we've got one more left with ISCI, who are going to join us to talk about going beyond the compliance matrix. That's going to be on the 4th of June. And I've got a couple more in our pipe that are going to be announced. So please, everyone, hold tight as I'm just wrapping up a few dates, and I'll share with you more sessions beyond the one on the 4th of June very, very soon. For now, thank you very much for joining us. To learn more about VisibleThread and VT Docs, you can head over to our website, VisibleThread.com. Always feel free to contact us if you've got questions about your VT Docs instance, any technical support questions. Go ahead and email support. If you're new to VisibleThread and would like a demo, email our info address. And as I said at the beginning, if you've got any questions directly for myself, feel free to reach out to me at my email address, evelyn.wolf@visibleThread.com. We're very, very active on LinkedIn, sharing latest, not just VisibleThread news, but also what's kind of happening in our virtual sessions and what's happening around the industry. So feel free to follow us on LinkedIn as well. We'd be delighted to engage with you there. As always, we wish you and your families and your teams good health from all the team here at VisibleThread. Stay safe. And thank you so very much for joining us today. And thanks again to Madison for a fantastic presentation. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.